Anachronism. Anachronism is when you take something from another age and you integrate it in an age that it did not exist. So if you look in that picture and you see them Orthodox Jews, wasn't no Orthodox Jews during the time of King Solomon. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe. Anachronism. Anachronism is when you take something from another age and you integrate it in an age that it did not exist. So if you look in that picture and you see them Orthodox Jews, wasn't no Orthodox Jews during the time of King Solomon. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe.
That the so-called Jews living in the state of Israel today, they are not the descendants of the biblical Israelites. First of all, the Bible says originally all the Israelites were dark-skinned people. Song of Solomon 1 and 5, I am black. The book of Daniel said the Lord got woolly hair. Daniel 7 and 9, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like the pure wool. And as we all know, Revelation, the first chapter, says Yahushua, the Son of God, has woolly hair. Revelation 1 and 14, his head and his hairs were white like wool. The biggest book in the Bible is the book of Psalms. If I ask people what color people sing gospel music, what's the first people that's going to pop in their head? If I ask you what color are the people that sing soul music, what's the first people that's going to pop in your head? King David played the harp. The modern day harp's the guitar. Jimi Hendrix is known as the best guitar player ever.
Assalamualaikum. In the 13th tribe, Arthur Koestler traces the origin of Eastern Europe's Jewish population that was largely decimated by the Nazi onslaught during the Second World War. Through extensive research, he discusses the history of a trading empire that was set up by a tribe known as the Khazars. The Khazar Empire was located between the expanding power blocks of Christianity and Islam, and the people were converted to Judaism by their king as a way of standing apart from both. The Khazarians and their wealth were dispersed through the countries of Eastern Europe after the collapse of the Khazar Empire. The Khazarians were not a Semitic people, that they called themselves Jews after their conversion to Judaism is as absurd as the Chinese Muslims calling themselves Arabs. Is as absurd as the Chinese Muslims calling themselves Arabs. Is as absurd as the Chinese Muslims calling themselves Arabs. The Khazarians were not a Semitic people, that they called themselves Jews after their conversion to Judaism is as absurd as the Chinese Muslims calling themselves Arabs. It is their descendants who later started the campaign for European Jews to return to Palestine, a land their ancestors never set foot on. The European Jews, i.e. descendants of Khazarians, were not descendants of Prophet Abraham, therefore bringing into question the legality of their claim on the Promised Land. This book had been out of print for many years and has only recently been republished.
Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
And surely Queen of Sheba wasn't looking like that.
Oh, no.
And King Solomon definitely didn't look like one of the Three Musketeers. And there's no way he would have a Star of David around his neck.
Yeah,
Star of David was not developed until the 14th century, and it was a Jewish symbol.
Wow.
This is to Ethiopian priests.
Wow.
That even though they are here and maintaining a holy, sacred area, but they part of the deception too. Because why would they allow a painting like that to be hanging up in their chapel?
Yeah.
So they have the King James version of who the biblical characters are, but they got a Bible in Alhambra. The images in that Bible ain't like this. So why? But somebody must have donated this to them
Had
to reinforce
Again, plenty of money for them to hang.
the wrong image. They here in the right place, but they got the wrong mind about how to understand even who they are.
First Maccabees, chapter 3, verse 47 through 49. Right? First Maccabees, chapter 3, starting at verse 47. It says, "Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and ashes upon their heads, and rent their clothes, and laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images." This is coming from chapter 5, the 7 books of the Jewish war. This is what it says. "After this, they were dispersed abroad on account of their languages, and went out by colonies everywhere. And each colony took possession of that land which they light upon, and unto which God led them, so that the whole continent was filled with them, both inland and the maritime countries. There were some also who passed over the sea in ships and inhabited the islands. And some of those nations do still retain the denominations which were given them by their first founders. But some have lost them also, and some have only admitted certain changes in them, that they might be the more intelligible to the inhabitants. And they were the Greeks, who became the authors of such mutations. So Josephus is giving an account of how the Greeks began to interpolate other cultures, including the Israelite culture. The Egyptians, everywhere they began to interpolate, they began to hijack those communities and take over their culture as if they are the originators. So it says, the Greeks who became the authors of such mutations, for when and after ages they grew potent, they claimed to themselves the glory of the antiquities, the glory of the ancient times, the glory of the old times. In other words, when it says glory, the heritage, the artwork, the culture, right? It says they claim to themselves the glory. The Hebrew word is kabod, which also can be interchangeable with sham, which means reputation. It means character. But it says the glory of the antiquities, giving names to the nations that sounded well in Greek, that they might be better understood among themselves, and setting agreeable forms of government over them, as if they were a people derived from themselves.
Anachronism. Anachronism is when you take something from another age and you integrate it in an age that it did not exist. So as you look in that picture and you see them Orthodox Jews, wasn't no Orthodox Jews during the time of King Solomon. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe. Wasn't even no civilized so-called Europe.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this fact, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was black. Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was the... Jacob had 12 sons. For real, and these were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to to Genesis chapter 10.